Carl, the first album you bought being a little kid, what was it?
My God, the first album I bought being a little kid, I'm looking up now going, let me think. It's by a band called Brass Construction. It was the same title, Brass Construction, and I bought it because they had a track on the album called Moving On. And this was in 1976.
And what did you like about this track?
What I liked about that album was that it was really funky. It was raw, it was uncut. Most of the tracks were like jamming, and you could really feel that there was a good energy between the band. I mean, Brass Construction was, as a band, was at least 12 to 14 people. So you had brass section, you had wind section, you had percussion, you had two bass players, you had all these people coming together. And I just loved the energy of the funk of that album. And there was many other albums to come, but Brass Construction for me was definitely the Carl Cox funky, raw, uncut sound, yeah.
When was the last time you listened to the album?
To be honest, I listened to the track Moving On around about a week ago. And it just because it was just my youth and of innocence, and also I still play a lot of funk and soul music still today, on which I still introduce that record in my sets. So for me to go back to my childhood always puts a smile on my face, especially that record because it's one of the first albums I bought.
Okay, you were 14 years back then when you bought this. What sort of kid were you? Age 14.
I was always a kid that was curious about everything. I was curious about combustion engines, I was curious about jet engines, how cars worked, how radio worked. I was curious about if I could play an instrument, I was curious if I could play football, everything. And most of the time it got me into trouble. So that was me as a kid. I was curious about a lot of things to do with life. And I found out the easy way on some ways and the hard way on others. But that was me as a nutshell. I never was one for staying indoors. I was always the one that always went outdoors. I was always the one that was always playing in the park. And when I was old enough to go to clubs, I was the first one to go to a nightclub and dance my ass off. This was me in my early teens as growing up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you mentioned already clubs, dancing your ass off. What struck you about dance music and clubs?
To be honest, I mean, I grew up listening to funk and soul music because of my father. Used to play the music at home, and I used to see people dancing to this music even when I was 8 years old. When I heard "Get Up Off of That Thing" by James Brown, this was a record which got everyone up off their feet, enjoying themselves, laughing, and this is women and men and women dancing and enjoying themselves to this funk music. And I just loved the energy of that. I like to see people enjoying themselves through one record, which brought people together. And I wanted to find out more about that music and where could I hear this sound. So I would find listings in newspapers. I would go to the clubs which played this music, which would allow me to come in sometime because I wasn't old enough to be there, but I looked old enough to be in. So I would just wear my dad's shirts and I would go into the club and drink Coca-Cola all night because that's all I could afford, but dance my ass off. And for me, this was always something that I just enjoyed doing. I was actually a dancer before I was a DJ.
So, but why didn't you pursue a dance career or maybe play in a funk or soul band?
I found that I couldn't find an instrument to play. I could play the drums and I could play the piano, but I didn't have a band. I couldn't find anyone around me that also had the same aspirations. And when it became me being a dancer, I actually was a ballroom dancer and a freestyle disco dancer, and I won medals for these things. But what was driving me so much more was being a DJ, was finding the music, playing the music to people to enjoy. And I found that in the end that was my vocation.
Okay. And then in the 80s, you turned to house music. Why specifically house music? It was a new genre?
House music really devised itself from disco music because disco music was always quite energetic as a movement of sound. And when the house music came around, it didn't have anything to do with a band. It had everything to do with an individual making this music. And for me, this was always something very, very interesting that the electronic sound of music was so much more powerful than disco music based on the sound you can get out of the machines, basically. And me being Mr. Curious, I was always driven by that sound, the acid house sound of the TB-303, the Juno 6 or the Juno 60 for bass lines, the Oscar for arpeggios, and how you was able to move the movement of synthesized music. This for me was the most revelation that I've ever had when it came to music. So as soon as the first acid house record came out, which was Chippy Time to Jack, I bought it, and that's my religion. That was my record. That started everything for me.
What's the last time you listened to that album, to that record?
Sorry?
What's the last time you've listened to that record?
I actually, last time I heard Chippy Time to Jack was about a year and a half ago, and I've never heard any other DJ play it. It's only me that understands that record that came out, and when you hear that record now, it sounds very 16-bit, kind of like very harshly recorded. You can hear that everything was done on tape, not digital. Everything was analog. But if he was able to clean that sound up and to play it today, it would still sound very, very fresh. And for me, that was the future of the music. It was always beyond itself. That's why it took a long time for people to understand it in the end.